So my name's Maze, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm here on Bunurong land. I work in video games as a freelancer. I'm pretty full-time now as a freelancer.
Yeah, I'm Nina. I started in radio. I became a host and a producer. I left in 2015 and founded my record label and decided to tour and kind of gallivant around the world. And COVID has brought me home. And now I'm pretty much full time behind the scenes.
If you do resonate with those statistics, how do you manage doing so much work and managing multiple things at once?
So the way I manage it, I do multiple things. I run lists. I'm pretty micromanaged to the point where if I want to make my own music, I book myself in a day and take the day off emails, because otherwise I will answer emails and not focus. I use a Microsoft free program called To Do. So if I get an email, I tag that, I write a note, it syncs to my phone, but then I still have like a workbook of what is a priority. And then at the start of the day, and then when I wake up, I have my coffee and I work out what to do, I prioritize a few things, and then I find myself moving things that can wait to the next day.
Probably similarly to you, Nina, when you mentioned that, you were touring and doing a lot before COVID and then everything was cancelled. I was similar. My job usually involves a lot of travel, which is why also having all of these like virtual tools makes sense. I've never experienced that 9 to 5 full-time job before. So a lot of it has been learning and also just kind of figuring out as constant balance between client work, types of clients, and artistic expression. Like something for me is realizing when I'm not expressing myself artistically anymore and I need to. I've always seen psychologists and therapists really regularly, so do that, and especially while you're at uni.
What I think I discovered too is that as you guys are working to find a role, you have to work out how you can share that work that you're doing, even if it's a small part of the project. And I know it sounds really dorky, but lately LinkedIn has become a really good, simple space to actually advocate your own work, because I think I found a lot of my behind the scenes work was going unnoticed because I don't tell anyone, because people don't realize that's what I'm doing. If a song you help design the cover for gets added to radio or you're featured on a blog post, like little things like that, it actually gives you this nice feed, and it's all about sharing and like document it. What makes you special as that portfolio worker? How do people know? Because otherwise, like, you're meant to do a CV, but no one is, I don't know how often you get work from a CV anymore. I'm sure you get work
all the
from
time. Yeah, it's really different. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to kind of discuss in the world that you work in like audio and games and whatnot, from the perspective of employment. I'd love to know a bit about where you think the trajectory for that is, and where people like us could maybe slot our music interests into that.
From a musician's perspective, there's a few major areas. So there's like sync music, which is really quite similar to film and advertising, but it is mostly in AAA, which is kind of the large, big budget games like Call of Duty, FIFA, Grand Theft Auto, all of those. But they have like some really exciting underground pop musicians getting great syncs with those games. There's a lot of other virtual concerts like Marshmallow in Fortnite and things like that. I've been working with the Victoria Music Development Office, VMDO, and they're really interested in getting indie bands working with indie games. It's a little bit less formal, like the sync process. It's a little bit more, here's a group of few people in a band, here's a group of few people making games. The games industry even has a Bandcamp. It's called itch.io. A lot of indie games don't really want to deal with like a label or a middle person. They, it's like band to band, no middle person. There's a few agents around for composers and sound designers. Again, it's kind of this middle person. There's a scene who likes to deal with middle people, and there's a scene who doesn't, Other than that, it's really independent people, like me, are contractors. So in Australia, there's barely any part-time or full-time sound or music jobs. There's a little bit of a learning curve in games too. There's a fair amount of game-specific knowledge that you need to be able to compose for a game. The player is kind of this DJ that you're giving assets to as they play around with all of your music and sounds and things. There are jobs for technical sound designers. There's more of that, but quite a large learning curve.
How do we make ourselves the most employable version of ourselves? How do we...
You think you work out what you don't like about working with someone and try not to be that. So if you get frustrated by people not writing back to an email, then always write back to their email. And especially in music, when it's so subjective, when you're looking after someone's creative, you have to be considered and professional. There's a fine line between emotion and professionalism in music, because it is someone's body of work. Be nice to people and be realistic and be honest. And if you can't do it, say no. I think I see too many people that talk absolute shit at me, and it's like, you can't promise anything. Unfortunately, with music, we don't know what's going to be number one, even if you programmed everything possible. It's total freaks of nature.